Now we are going to wrap things up and not maybe saving the best till last. I don't know. Does it always come down to, and should it always come down to standards and measurements? I think a lot of people will agree. So I am going to introduce Catherine Chow, who is the product manager for Index Exchange, who will be moderating this panel. And we've got a great lineup of panelists that are going to be joining. David from Magnite, we've got Simon from GroupM, and then we have Giovina from Rakuten. So this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I'm going to pass straight over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Cho, product manager at Index Exchange, responsible for CTV product and initiatives. I'm very excited to be joining this panel as a moderator today and discuss one of the most important topics of CTV advertising market. We all know the importance of measurement in media campaigns, and we all watch out for whether we're reaching the right audience, we're reaching at the right time with right frequency, how effective is our message. All of these questions are at the top of the marketers, publishers, and everyone involved along the way. And CTV, with its unique intersection between TV and digital advertising, presents a unique set of challenges, but with exciting opportunities as well, as previous panels discussed. So today, we want to invite all of you to engage in our conversation with three industry leaders, Simon, David, and Giovina. Without further ado, let's just dive into our first topic. When we talk about standards for CTV, where are we in comparison with linear TV measurement or digital advertising measurement? If each of you, David, Simon, Giovina, if you could start your answer with a brief introduction of yourselves, that would be great. I guess we could start with Simon. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. It's the GroupM default to keep me quiet. Hi, Simon Thomas from GroupM. I have a global role. I am responsible for audience measurement in all its guises. That may be for planning, that may be for tactical planning, strategic planning. It could be for activation and across all channels. And I've been doing it for about 45 years now. So I've begun to understand a little bit of it. And it's always changing. Yeah, it's difficult times. Where is CTV? The first thing I'd say is, I think increasingly we try to get away from thinking of CTV. We think about total video. That's what an advertiser's interested in. They're interested in the totality, the holistic. And I think for far too long, we've had this TV versus digital and CTV and AVOD and SVOD and hybrid SVOD and BVOD. It is inventory, and it's an opportunity to communicate a brand message to a potential or existing consumer. And that really, for me, being an old-fashioned madman from the old days, that's what it's all about. It's about the advertising. It's not about eyeballs. It's not about impressions. It's about effectiveness of brand communication, whether you're upper funnel, bottom of the funnel, or a balance between the two, which is the norm. So TV's actually established, or television, primarily linear, but now increasingly BVOD as well, has established a whole set of processes and standards over many years, some of which are regulatory. The UK, for example, has to comply with Ofcom. They have no choice. And the way in which copy has to go through Clearcast to be approved, very different to a more liberal video and digital video environment. TV starts off, I think, with quite a big advantage in that it has all of those systems and standards established. Many of you won't be aware that back in the 1980s, each of the TV stations, including the regional ones in the UK, produced different programme and advertiser logs with no consistency. And it all had to be collated together and normalised, which is a massive job. And actually, for me at the moment, that is the biggest single issue in terms of taking investment and getting return for clients further in CTV, that particular niche, is the duplicity and multiplication of standards, processes, and taxonomies and governance and so on and so forth. I think the quicker that gets fixed, and I know there will be a number of people on the call and on previous panels that I've talked to this about many times, the quicker we can do that, and not just market by market, but internationally. I think we were talking about this on AIB Europe's Brand Advertising Committee 12 years ago. So it's not a new topic. That for me is the biggest single thing. I think the industry but by that the digital video industry has moved a very long way, and particularly with premium video, still has to move to a more standardized, regulated, and transparent environment.
Amazing perspective. I like that. The fact that you don't want to necessarily like CTV as like a merge of linear and digital, but we have to fresh look at total video. Measurement's always measurement, and effectiveness of the advertising campaign. Love that. All right, let's switch. Giovina, do you want to
Yes.
provide your perspective?
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Giovina di Tonno, and I'm Senior Director Media Sales for Italy and Spain. I'm essentially leading a commercial team responsible for commercialization of our advertising inventory across Rakuten TV. So I'm representing the publisher side. I totally agree with what Simon before saying, adding maybe the part of digital comparison, even on digital side, on comparison to digital video, CTV is still struggling due to lack of governance, lack of metric, etc., etc. I'm working day by day with agency, with direct clients, and just to mention a couple of metrics and the standard trackability, we still no track. It's still not possible, like in digital, work with in-target audience, so measure in-target audience with Nielsen is still not possible. For example, when we track EVTV traffic, understand what drop in EVTV traffic or valid traffic, because each single device producer, publisher, match and map the device in different way. Or on creative side, there are buyers that use video from television and buyers that use video from digital strategy, and the format not 100% measurable right now. And last but not least, incremental reach, because in the panel before, someone mentioned BARP from UK. I work in the country where BARP doesn't exist, and incremental reach is a hot topic. And it's the main matrix measurement where we struggle a lot in comparison with digital TV, and at the end also to the traditional TV, so it's a double phase. And just maybe to add a couple, some highlight, we recently did in Rakuten inside survey, asking to our buyer agency and clients, direct buyer, which is the main blocker that prevent investing in CTV and growing in investing in CTV, because some clients start to use but they don't grow. And 40% of our respondents at the end answer yes, it's a lack of standardization in measurement, etc., etc. So I confirm that also on publisher side we get the same challenging feedback.
Right. Awesome. So we have the buyer side, Simon's perspective, Giovina from the publisher side. Let's go to David.
Catherine, hi, and thanks to IB for inviting me to be part of the panel, actually. So David Snocken's the name. A great thing about these events is it's up on the screen, so life is easy. We don't have to remember so much. And I have the pleasure of looking after partnerships for EMEA at Magnite. And I've got to say, without a doubt, there's a lot still for us to do here for sure to reach a full omni-channel solution. But I'm always keen to recognize that there's actually a lot of really good innovation that's been growing up, particularly over the last year or two. And I think in some ways there's an answer and there's both a challenge at the same time in kind of bringing some of these solutions together and matching and marrying them. And I appreciate that sort of at a campaign level, that's quite tough, but there are various kind of pockets of solutions available that would help all the way from a funnel measurement through brand lift surveys, digging into, Giovanni, you mentioned in a moment ago, the incremental reach capability, looking at on-target audiences. There's lots of nuances and differences in there, but even getting down to some of that kind of lower funnel measurement. I know it's slightly less of a focus at the moment, but there are capabilities out there for conversion and attribution as well. So there's a lot to do, but I feel like there's quite a lot of pieces of jigsaw on the table, let's say, at the moment for us to work with. And I think in reality, it's fundamental that we keep focusing on this, because in my relatively simplistic mind, unless you can prove really clearly the value of this through measurement, that's the enabler for driving more spend and more growth in that CTV space. We sit at that doorway, I think, at the moment to unlock a lot of that opportunity. And if I look a little bit in comparison to where does CTV sit with more classical kind of display OLV type of words, I think always got to remember, first and foremost, actually the measurement KPIs are different here. Above and below the fold doesn't make sense in a CTV space. It's irrelevant. We need to be tuning in and honing into the right KPIs in the right sort of channels. And there's a really strong focus, for obvious reasons, with CTV at the moment in terms of being able to measure incremental reach. It's all about where's that net new audience that I can find and I can prove that my message is reaching them, my message is resonating. But at the same time, combining that with some of the things that were mentioned previously around just on target audience percentage, it's great, but am I finding the right people? So am I, if I were to follow it through, am I likely to be getting the right kind of performance and conversion results out of this, even though I might not be measuring them directly at the moment? And we've talked a bit about that on the other panels, about that balance between kind of household level and individual level. And we are at that, very much at that kind of household stage at the moment. And I think, yes, it's where we are as an industry for CTV. I think we also have to keep in mind, though, that as that industry grows and develops, there are already multiple boxes appearing, multiple devices in multiple houses for differing reasons. So whilst household is where we are at the moment, because we don't have that cookie opportunity, whatever cookie is going to mean in this sort of in the near future, it's still important, I think, for us to keep a sight on the different use cases within a household environment. There's variation there that will be materially different when it comes to a sort of a measurement across the top of it. And I think I'm going to finish off on just one last point, really, for me. It's great to see people like ITV very recently making some moves in that space of bringing a bit more kind of granularity and a bit more detail into some of that long form video kind of content. And I think, getting more data, getting more granular sort of contextual type of data throughout that video at a scene level, at the sort of ITV at an emotion, all of that is going to be pretty fundamental. Like, for me, targeting, measurement, sort of two sides of the same coin in many ways. So one very much benefits the other. And I think kind of classical display at the moment there's a lot of capability there. There's some work for us to do there to catch up.
Absolutely agree that targeting, measurement, two sides of the same coin. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we already touched upon a little bit. What I had in mind for that second topic is, we know standardization and CTV being a newcomer relative, we need to give some time, and there is some mileage catch-up work to do, even though, as David mentioned, there are exciting existing already progress made in that area. Let's talk about specifically challenges. What are some of the dependencies and roadblocks we see slowing down the momentum of measurement standardization? What's preventing a few of them, or a single, or those solutions to get quicker adoption in the market? Is there something that we need to work together to overcome? I think, Simon, do you want to start us off once more?
Yeah, why not? I think what's interesting is linking back to the previous two panels. I think there was a lot of talk. We need to be very clear. Are we talking about measurement, or are we talking about currency? Two very different things. One is used for strategic and tactical planning, and potentially for a little bit of activation, but the currency is actually what the client pays, what the direct advertiser or agency on behalf of an advertiser pays. So that's a trading metric. TV or linear TV is not perfect. It really isn't. TV is measured on an opportunity to see, an OTS. That's it. You move through from an exposure to, is it viewable? Well, was it actually viewed? That's a whole new question. And then how much attention was mentioned. I promise I won't go into attention in detail, but attention's an important factor we need to start looking at as a component of effectiveness, all the way through to outcomes. And it was quite rightly said in Paul's panel, different clients in different categories with different products at different stages of that product or brand's development, and the balance between brand equity building and bottom funnel performance will have very different KPIs. And so we need to cope with all of that. And I think really the biggest single thing holding us back, and I'm not suggesting we should trade on it, but we need to do a lot more with econometric modeling, some attribution. Cookies going is going to give us a few problems, I suspect, with that longer term. But we need to do a lot more work on outcomes to show the value to the advertiser. It's not about price. I was on the sales side many years ago, many decades ago. It's out of date now, but I do remember the pressure on generating the revenue, and it's a tough economic climate out there. And I think that's probably for us the biggest challenge is one is actually acknowledging that all sides of the media channels have got to actually be looking at moving forward, looking at the way in which we plan for our clients, and then how we deliver the client's objectives to provide that value. And then within that, there's a whole drop-down list of things that are barriers: JICs, commercial silos, political issues, anti-competitive. TF1 and M6 tried to merge in France. They weren't allowed to. And so on. And there's a whole realm of stuff coming out the US, where Nielsen no longer is a monopoly. We have iSpot, and we have VideoAmp and Innovid, and ComScore with Rentrack. Should we measure at households or should we measure at individuals? If we're measuring at households, how accurate can personification be using AI? And I could go on for hours, as some people on here know. I won't. I'll stop there. But those to me are the biggest single barriers, and actually getting the industry to work together. It's not a TV versus digital anymore. It needs to be a holistic industry approach.
Absolutely. Giovina, I know.
Yes, on publisher side, I leave to Simon and to David maybe the technical blocker that slowing down the standardization. On publisher side, I can mention the fact that when I started to sell connected TV, advertising over connected TV at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, essentially we speak about advertising video on demand. Actually, CTV supported by advertising have different soul. Netflix and next year Amazon launches, or Disney subscription video on demand advertising, so SVOD. This year is everybody mentioned fast, so free advertising supported streaming television. I could be on our side a speed up, that an element that speed up adoption across different audience, but at the same time it could make a bit slower the standardization, because we honestly AVOD and FAST are totally two different business model in terms of the content that a publisher can offer for licensing, etc., etc. It's a different. There are two different models in terms of the user, how the user can get content free with advertising. AVOD and FAST are totally different. This is the most similar medium to linear traditional TV, and for sure at the end, even on delivery of advertising, the experience is not the same. So it's a little bit a blocker, because for sure we cannot expect, for example, across AVOD and FAST, maybe we can have the same metrics, but we cannot at the end measure the same KPI. It's absolute, not an utopia, but it's really different. So I think that on our side, something that is boost the audience, the grow, at the end is slowing a little bit the moving to standardization. Even if I can add the last point, I'm not sure that we arrive at standardization. Mean totally agree with Simon and with David before as adoption of fully metrical television and digital. I think that we'll arrive at the moment where we are harmonize industry player with a specific metric for fast, AVOD, etc., that mix a little bit of this. And the publisher evolution that starts from AVOD and finish at fast, crossing via SVOD, already proved this essentially.
Yeah, right on. David.
Giovina, you've said a word there that is, for me, just wonderful. Harmonized, actually. We talk about standardization as fitting everything into the same kind of model, but maybe harmonization is a much better play for us here. I'm going to take that one away for sure. The kind of, like at the top of my mind, I look at this as three sort of primary areas, really. We've talked a lot about that cross-device identity piece as being one of the bigger challenges. I think, that's one thing in itself, but the real driver and the value for that is just being able to join up that customer journey. We've talked about QR codes, we've talked about attribution and conversion. Let's not lose sight of the fact that really the goal there is to make sure that we can understand how that consumer really engages with all the various parts of the funnel here, because that has a huge impact on the way that you would measure and attribute the results to those campaigns. But I think a couple of other areas I'll call out is that there's differing methodologies in the marketplace here. Some approaches are panel based, and that brings, particularly like in an EMEA context, that brings some real challenges actually. When you look inside just practically some of the local market scales and sizes and the panel sizes within the markets, and then you overlay the campaign scales, you start to get down to areas where it can become quite challenging to drive a meaningful measurement result from those type of approaches and solutions. But at the same time, there's also the more of the growing methodologies that are much more kind of directly connected. But there's that balance between the value of a deterministic panel, you understand it is what it is, and the more kind of probabilistic models there. So I think I'm almost going to use the previous panel's word here in terms of fragmentation across some of those methodologies. I think there's a challenge for us as an industry to figure out how we do harmonize those, how we can make those sort of fit together and work together in a way where we can look at those sets of results and feel like they're telling the same story in terms of the campaign performance. And just that underlying kind of consistency in the market is tricky. It's been mentioned before here that the UK has Barb. It's very different in other parts of the European marketplace. And there are regional players, there are regional solutions that are growing and sprouting. Some are pan-European for sure, but there's a lot of, let's say, patchwork quilt of bringing various different kind of innovative partners together. To put those all together, I'm going to change what I was going to say. It's the challenge is a bit of fragmentation, actually, just in our measurement world rather than everywhere else. But maybe we can find ways to harmonize that.
Yeah, I echo you. That harmonization is like a new concept. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, David's raised a really important point. Just one thing everyone needs to be aware of: Barb is not unique. France have Médiamétrie. Italy have Auditel and AudiWeb. Germany has the AGF. Sweden has MMS, and so on and so forth. Every country in Europe either has a joint industry committee or a media-only committee. And this is the point I want to make: paying the bulk of the audience measurement through panels. And it is a commercial night. It's a yoke around their necks, because as the market's fragmented, the panels aren't big enough to deal with particularly more advanced and discrete audiences. And so it's a commercial barrier. And actually, and this is something I helped with an IPA study in the UK on, across all the JICs in the UK, is the money we as an industry, and I'll be lynched for this by colleagues, I suspect, the amount of money we spend on the research is too small to actually get the results we want. And so we have to compromise all the time. And at the end of the day, it is the advertiser who pays for it all. And to see in the case of the World Federation of Advertiser project, in terms of cross-media measurement initiative, which is origin in the UK and the ANA project in the US to start with, that they're paying again to do a cross-media net reach post-campaign evaluation. I think that says an awful lot about actually why hasn't the industry sorted this. But nobody wants to pay for it, particularly the agencies. Absolutely, we haven't got any money. The media owners are saying we're paying for it, a lot of it already, particularly the TV part of it, and the broadcasters will claim that. The research companies take the contracts. So who is going to pay for all of this? And I think that's one of the problems, is that as the market's fragmented, the vertical panels have become actually less important as the horizontal census data informs the detail. But we need both. We can't do it with just one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we touched upon a lot of names of the initiatives, and I don't know particularly if all the audience caught all of it, but I think it's a great segue into our really key we wanted to get into. What is industry doing about the the challenges and standardization. I, for one, am very excited about IAB's open measurement initiative, how it's expanding to include more and more of CTV device platforms. It already has Apple TV, Android, and Fire TV coverage, and we'll have Samsung, Tizen, and LG TV by the end of the year, just as one example of just try to bring all those fragmented platforms for measurement together. What are some of the other measurement and standardization initiatives and programs? I know I heard a lot of names, Simon, and I know you are involved very closely with a lot of these in Europe. Could you walk us through a few important ones? And in your opinion, which one should we focus more than the other?
You need to focus on them all, because each market is going with its own solution. The Netherlands have combined their JICs together. They put them, the joint industry committees, they put them all in the same building, including the digital JIC. They're working together, and the contract was awarded to Kantar, plus Ipsos, plus Comscore, plus Nielsen, plus GfK. All the research companies are involved, but Kantar are leading it. In Italy, there's been fantastic work done by Auditel and AudiWeb together, working with Nielsen. Kantar in the UK doing some great cross-media work, but also involved, obviously, with Barb and Dovetail, which is the expansion into the iPlay, the players marketplace, and the BVOD. C-Flight to bring together for the first time BVOD ad server ad measurement as impressions, convert them into GRPs, so that it's apples to apples, and combine them with the Barb GRPs. For me, that's mega. That is seriously important. Our friends and client at Google doing an enormous amount of cross-media measurement work, both as part of the WFA project, but also their own. Meta are doing some work. Amazon are doing work. In individual countries, there is different levels of traction, because there's different level of progress, and I think the word is used is maturity. I don't think it's maturity. I just think it's related to the previous market legacy and structure and ecosystem, and the penetration of advertising supported CTV or FAST or BVOD or whatever it might be is different in every single market. It's something I know my American colleagues have great problems understanding, how different the European countries are. But the biggest one of them all is what's actually happening in the States, where Nielsen have now got competitors in iSpot and Video Amp and Innovid and others, Comscore's Rentrack. We are now having to load multiple currencies, not just measurement, multiple currencies into our campaign tracking systems, because we may be trading, so that's actually the money that is billed, we may be trading not on a Nielsen rating, but on an iSpot rating. However, the client still wants the reassurance of how does that compare to the Nielsen rating. As an industry, particularly people of my maturity in the industry, we don't like too much change. And actually, when you look at what's changed over the last 15 years, massive change in the industry, and how we've managed that, I think, has been phenomenal. But we've missed the big one, which is actually a unified, and to use the word, David, absolutely harmonized measurement. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it needs to be compatible and interchangeable. Because at the moment, we've got too many siloed solutions, and individual publishers coming up with their own solutions. So we end up with even more walled gardens than we started off with. We don't want that. We really don't. We don't need it. The industry can't afford to do it at the moment, let alone with additional walled gardens in there, perhaps coming from the broadcast side. And just to throw in a final comment is, and how are we going to cope and work with what used to be called linear broadcast TV, moving into programmatic trading, which it is in the UK right now with ITV Planet V. It's happening. The TV broadcasters haven't been sitting still for the last 5 years. They've been very busy, believe me.
I'm going to chip in, and I've got to say, I love the word and the principle of innovation. Innovation is great. I think there are so many different kind of panels and activities and places where we can all be working together. I think the only challenge I see for us collectively is just making sure that innovation doesn't become the enemy of collaboration. It can be quite difficult to get a whole bunch of different initiatives to drive together in the right direction. And I think as an industry, one of the things that would be wise for us all to do is to keep an eye on that end goal, actually, and just make sure we are heading in the same place. Putting aside the fact there are always going to be regional differences in exactly how you get there, it's the end goal that should stay very much in focus here.
Yeah, and to David's point, sorry, Giovina, to David's point, and this is an IAB Europe session. It's organisations like IAB Europe and EGTA, which is the TV broadcasters, and EACA, the European advertising agencies, alongside ANA, the advertisers, 4As and IAB in the US, working together as industry associations. And again, just to flag the fact, IAB Europe does reach out along with EGTA, the TV guys, and the agencies in Europe to our American cousins, and we have very detailed knowledge exchange sessions with them. It's the first time I've experienced that in my 45 years in the business. What happened in the US always stayed in the US. What happened in Europe stayed in Europe. We're now cooperating. I think that is actually a massive breakthrough in the last 2 years.
I love we're sharing the positive tone, and we're moving. Like I am confident after the session that we're moving in the right direction for sure, across the region, across the industry, across the fragmented sort of platforms and everywhere. Giovina, I have to
Yes, no worry. Just on don't expect immediately from publisher perspective that we work all together to solve this, because some of us are just arriving in the market and they have the high level of integration with TV manufacturer. But for sure, the fact that a big buyer, like I mentioned, Procter, start to set a global strategy, push us to collaborate, because of course I mentioned Procter. If Procter start to use graph of the Trade Desk graph ID to recognize unique device and unique user, for sure all of us we need to adapt on this. I don't expect immediately to collaborate to colleague with Amazon, ex-colleague of Amazon, but I expect that buyer push to do this as a, and that's it.
But
right,
Giovina, sadly, Procters are a client of ours, as are Unilever, as are Coca-Cola, as are Colgate. They all have different solutions. There is no one single solution. We've got to have flexibility and adaptability.
Yes.
Yeah, Helen, I don't know if we have some time. I had the last question, like, where do we see challenges, and we see various momentum initiatives that's happening with fast speed, and where do you all see in 12 months from now? Will we be at the more harmonized or more standard, like one standard winning over the other? I'm wondering if we have time to go over very quickly, half a second, like a minute or so, Helen, or should we close it off? Or I know you've
got about a minute. Yeah, absolutely. I'd rather use the wrap up time for you guys than me telling people what's happened today. So please go for it.
12 months from now, where do you, like, Simon?
Go on. Okay, we need a value-driven, business results, outcome-based, sustainable, flexible, harmonized ecosystem. We won't have it in the next 12 months.
It's a little longer then. Okay.
We won't have it in 12 months. I don't even think we'll have it in 24. 36, we might get there.
The realistic view. Awesome. David, where do you see our standard measurement? Do you share the same view? It's not necessarily 12 months, but we're moving there 36 months.
Super quick. There's a really long journey to be had here. I think over the next 12 months, I would look at, like, where would we be? I think CTV spend will continue to grow, but what that will bring in measurement context is more of a drive towards some of that lower funnel kind of measurement work. So I think we'll start to see a shift from that focus on kind of brand to more of that performance and attribution. And I think that's great, because that tells the story about growth and more acceptability of measurement in the marketplace. I do think we'll see some platforms come up to join together that customer journey more effectively. And I've got to say, I think I'd love us to be seeing the first glimmerings just beyond the ITV work of some good granular signaling. I think that's feasible within that time frame as well.
Perfect.
On my side, I agree with what they say. So the more adoption of ID, brand uplift, interactive creative, the more adoption on our side will boost a little bit more, the more and more in the next 12 months for the spending and the harmonization.
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much.